Media ban on a high-profile corruption trial lifted. Thai military chief says he's got King's support to rule the country. And decisive gain for Eurosceptics in European parliamentary elections.
Good evening. A 9-member jury panel was chosen today for the corruption trial of former Chief Secretary of Administration Raphael Hui and Sun Hung Kai Properties Joint Chairman Thomas and Raymond Kwok. The 5 defendants in the case, including another Sun Hung Kai executive and a former senior official of Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing, arrived at the High Court amid a flurry of media this morning. Court of First Instance Judge Andrew McRae today lifted the media ban that had been imposed to ensure fairness before the jury was chosen. This as the court made room for the 150-strong jury pool from which 9 jurors were to be selected. Starting from tomorrow, the jury will have to spend their days at court focusing on the trial, which the judge expects to last until September. In the hearing that involves the highest-level former government official in Hong Kong history, many members of the jury pool asked to be exempt from the court case. Many of them cited their poor proficiency in English as the reason. At one point, Mr. Justice McRae questioned how one member managed to pass his advanced-level English exam when he claimed to only understand a small part of the judge's simple questions, causing many observers at the open hearing to erupt in laughter. The jury selection process took nearly 2 hours. 4 women and 5 men were finally chosen by early afternoon. Mr. Justice McRae once again reminded them to put everything they'd heard in the media and from other people out of their minds and consider and weigh only the evidence they hear in the courtroom. The judge also ordered the jurors not to research the details of the case or discuss what they've heard in court with anyone, specifically making a point to include research and discussions on social networking media and other platforms on the internet. Among the witnesses to be called are former Secretary for Housing, Planning and Lands Michael Soon, former Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development Rita Lau, and Charles Lee, former Chairman of Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing. All 5 defendants earlier pleaded not guilty to all the charges against them. Only the former Chief Secretary faces all 8 charges, which surround misconduct in public office, conspiracy to offer an advantage to a public servant, and furnishing false information. Raphael Hui is accused of taking $34 million worth of cash, loans and benefits from the other defendants while he served in different government roles.
Turning overseas now, the military leader of Thailand's coup says he's received the endorsement of the country's king to run the nation. Meanwhile, the head of the anti-government protest has been charged with treason in connection with more than 6 months of sometimes deadly demonstrations.
In his first public address since last Thursday's coup, General Prayut Chan-o-cha justified the putsch, saying he had to act in the face of the increasingly violent confrontations. He said Thailand's king, Bhumipol Adulyadej, has given him the royal command that calls for reconciliation among the people. Prayut also repeated a warning that anti-coup protests would be met with force from the army. There have been sporadic demonstrations, most calling for elections, since the coup last week. Violent protests since last November have left 28 people dead and more than 800 injured. Meanwhile, the firebrand leader of the country's anti-government protests, Suthep Thakksuban, was released from detention, then immediately ordered to go to the office of the Attorney General, where he was charged with treason. The charges stem from the blocking of the February 2nd election. He was released on bail. The fate of Thailand's former Prime Minister, Yingluck Shinawatra, who turned herself into the junta last Friday, remains unclear. That's despite a report quoting an unnamed military official saying she'd been allowed to go home but remains under military supervision. The military said previously most of the people detained would be released after a week. General Prayut said he'd like to hold an election as soon as possible, but did not give a time frame. The Army's 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew remains in place, but normalcy is otherwise returning to the streets of Bangkok. Today, schools reopened for the first time since last Thursday. But troops continue to keep watch for any renewed protests. Alan Brookney at TVB News.
A fire at a bus terminal and shopping complex on the outskirts of Seoul this morning left 5 people dead and more than 20 others injured. The blaze broke out shortly after 9 a.m. in Goyang, a suburban neighborhood just north of the South Korean capital. The fire started in the food court area at the basement of the terminal building, where renovation was being carried out. Officials suspect something went wrong during welding works. Firefighters got the blaze under control in 20 minutes. Many of the victims were found at a toilet. They mostly suffered from smoke inhalation. The local fire chief has warned that the number of dead could rise.
Far-right and Eurosceptic groups have made big gains in the European parliamentary elections, dealing a huge blow to the establishment in many EU's member states. The outcome means a greater say for those who want to roll back the EU or abolish it completely.
Europe has voted, and the results show decisive gains for both the far right and left. They all share one thing in common: a deep mistrust of the European Union. Pro-Europe parties may still have a majority in the European Parliament, but the gains made by the anti-EU bloc will force Brussels to rethink things on key issues such as immigration, the euro, and imposing austerity on countries hit by the Eurozone debt crisis. In France, the country is reeling after the far-right National Front, led by Marine Le Pen, won the largest share of seats in her country. Le Pen said the French people were fed up with Paris giving away sovereignty to Brussels.
Notre peuple exige une seule politique.
Our people demand one policy only, a policy of the French for the French and with the French, said Le Pen. The result is a disaster for French President François Hollande, whose Socialist Party finished a dismal third. The election also dealt a huge blow to Britain's political establishment. Led by Nigel Farage, the UK Independence Party won the largest share of British seats in the European Parliament, ousting the ruling Conservative coalition and opposition Labour Party. It's the first time since 1910 that a UK political contest had not been won by either the Conservatives or Labour. Echoing Le Pen, Farage said voters were fed up with their politicians for ignoring concerns about Europe.
Since the European project made its 2 massive mistakes, firstly the Eurozone, which clearly doesn't work and has left a vast swathe of the Mediterranean now stuck in a downward deflationary spiral, and secondly the enlargement of the Union to bring in the former Soviet bloc countries with the rights of free movement between poor and rich countries.
In Greece, the biggest winners were the far-left anti-austerity party Syriza and the extreme-right Golden Dawn. The leftist anti-austerity movement also won in Spain. Even Denmark, which has been generally pro-Europe, saw gains for the far-right and its Eurosceptic agenda.
Early returns in Ukraine's presidential elections suggest candy tycoon Petro Poroshenko has been elected president after the first round of balloting. The so-called Chocolate King vowed to put an end to war, chaos and crime and restore peace to Ukraine. The 48-year-old billionaire claimed victory after exit polls showed him with a commanding lead in Sunday's vote. He supports strong relations with Europe, but also wants to mend ties with Russia. Trying to bring order to eastern Ukraine will be his top priority after many in 2 provinces there voted to break away from the country in favor of closer ties with Russia.
Egyptians are going to the polls today to choose a new president after nearly a year after the ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. The man who led the coup ousting Morsi, former army chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, is widely expected to win the election. Strongly backed by the media, al-Sisi appears poised to rout his only rival, leftist Hamdin Sabahi, who finished third in the 2012 election. That poll was Egypt's first democratic election following the overthrow of long-time autocrat Hosni Mubarak. There was heavy security today for the first of the 2-day vote. Confident in his victory and because of security concerns, al-Sisi has not made a single street appearance in his campaign. Well, the White House says US President Barack Obama wants to conclude a new security agreement with Afghan President Hamid Karzai's successor. Speaking to American troops on a surprise visit, Obama thanked them for their efforts in maintaining peace and security in Afghanistan. He didn't meet with Karzai during his unannounced stop to the country. Obama's trip seems to have marked the start of a White House effort to answer questions about his foreign policy beyond Iraq and Afghanistan. The ongoing Syrian conflict and Russia's actions in Ukraine have raised questions about how the US can credibly threaten consequences when Obama clearly wants to stay out of another war.
Pope Francis called for respect and love between religions on the third and final day of his tour of the Mideast. The Pope met today with Mohammed Hussein, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, at the third holiest spot in Islam, the Dome of the Rock. The mosque complex, known to Muslims as the Noble Sanctuary and to Jews as Temple Mount, is at the heart of the territorial and religious disputes between Israel and its Arab neighbors. Pope Francis has used his trip to plea for an end to the generations-old Middle East conflict. During the visit, he invited the Israeli and Palestinian presidents to join him at the Vatican next month. And still ahead in the news tonight. The Competition Commission seeks public views on legislation. Junior and middle-ranking civil servants demand bigger pay hikes. And Japan beats Hong Kong to earn a World Cup spot.
I'm not doing any more chemo.
I'm not gonna let you just die.
I don't owe you anything.
I'm done with Wilson.
You can't just abandon him.
House loses it.
He just doesn't want to live in pain.
Life is pain! I wake up every morning, I'm in pain. You know how many times I wanted to just give up?
Tonight, House at 10:50 on Pearl.
The hottest dragon boat event. Join us at the Sun Life Stanley International Dragon Boat Championships. 2nd of June, 2014, Stanley, Maine Beach. Life's brighter with your support.
World Cup Brazil, Tournament of the Strongest, is supported by Adidas, SEMA, Samsung, United Asia Finance Limited, Itacho Sushi, Gatsby, Macau Government Tourist Office, Xing Photo Supplies 40th Anniversary presents Wild Brazil, Tuesday night at 9:30 on Pearl Spectacular.
We're back tonight with more local news. The Competition Commission is seeking public opinion on how to enforce a law designed to ensure there's a level playing field in Hong Kong's commercial sector. Commission Chairwoman Anna Wu says even though the city has a free market, there are examples of anti-competitive practices here. Zhao De Silva with the story.
Go into any supermarket in Hong Kong and sometimes you'll pretty much pay the same price for the same products regardless of which store you went to. This shopper thinks the supermarkets are in cahoots. Milk, toilet paper, it's the same everywhere, he says. All the prices go up at the same time. That's exactly what the competition ordinance is supposed to prevent. It was passed nearly 2 years ago, but implementation has been slow because the enforcement guidelines for the commercial sector are still being worked out. The Competition Commission, which is responsible for implementing the law, has launched a public consultation on the guidelines. The ordinance aims to regulate all anti-competitive agreements. That is, any price fixing between companies, for example. Second, the law aims to regulate companies that have a certain domination in the market to prevent abuse of power. For example, demanding suppliers not to supply to its competitors. On defining market domination, the Commission will look at the number of market operators and difficulties in breaking into the market. Guidelines on mergers and acquisitions target the telecommunications industry. The aim is to prevent such mergers from weakening market competition. It's proposed the Commissioner would investigate companies suspected of breaking the rules. Once found guilty,